Hey guys, welcome to the Unshakable Man podcast, a community for men who want to practice tools and skills to get out of our heads and egoic patterns and to get into our bodies. In this week's episode, we begin the very first section of our 4-week fundamentals course. I'm joined today with Unshakable Man stewards, Mike Messersmith and Londell Jackson. And in today's training, what we're going to be doing is exploring the somatic science of being present, why being present is a requirement to do the work that we do here. And we're going to spend the majority of the episode teaching you guys the 3x3 Unshakable Man Check-in technique. So for men who have already enrolled in the training and in the course itself, if you're already a member of our community, all you need to do is go ahead and just let your steward know that you are participating in this month's cohort, and then we'll add you to the list so that we're all engaged together and we can communicate in the community. If you haven't enrolled in our community, you're not a member of the community, and you're listening to this on our podcast, that is exactly why we publish these episodes in public. It's so that they're super accessible for any and all men to practice and to discover these tools and skills. You can absolutely practice this on your own, and you can listen to this episode, but we do need to be in relationship in order to actually practice these skills. And that's why this community exists, is so that the men that are out there who want to practice tools and skills to get out of our head and egoic patterns and to get into our bodies, well, we have a community, we have a group of other men who want to prioritize this in their life and in their relationships. And that's why we're here. So it'd be super awesome to see you in the community. Just head over to unshakableman.com to enroll. And we start this course every month, the first week of the month, and we move through it together. So Mike, Londell, welcome in.
Thanks, Chris. Nice to be here. Thanks.
It's good to be with you, gentlemen. I notice for myself a desire in every one of these, just because we spend so much time together in group. I notice a desire to do the check-in in every single one of these episodes. But it's funny because we are talking about the work, and I'm showing up in a different way here, right? Like presenting almost. And I notice the tonality in my voice and the subtle shifts on and in my body of how much different it is to be in group versus how it is to be here. But I guess I just wanted to share that, because to me, sharing and talking about the work is not actually doing the work. And it's really important to me to always remind myself of that, and to remind any of the men who might be listening to this that, like, when we're talking about this out loud or we're reading about it in a book, we're not actually doing it, right? That's the view. And then we have the practice. So to just get us started here, I'd love to just start out with crafting the alliance. And I'm going to use you gentlemen to be able to do this authentically and to walk through this together as if we were in a group. But to anyone who's listening to this out there in the future, crafting the alliance is something that we do in every single group. And it's very, very important that we do this in order to allow the protective parts of ourselves that have come to form through an adaptive process of surviving to get to where we are today as human beings and men, that they can start to trust us to get comfortable, to get uncomfortable. They can start to trust us to relax and to step aside so that we can do deeper work. And so crafting the alliance, this is a set of agreements that all of the men in the space, we need to be able to agree to these in order to allow ourselves to show up and to create a brave space. And so the 3 things are confidentiality versus secrecy, the intention, which comes in 3 parts: my intention, your intention, and the intention of the specific container that we're in that day. And then the 3rd one is, sometimes it's called the paradox of safe space, or cultivating a brave space or a brave relationship. And so my reason for reviewing these with you here today on the show and on the podcast is because you might be listening to this in your car. You might be listening to this while you're getting some work done. You might be listening to this right before coming to your first group. And so it's just really important to me that everything we talk about today be held within the context of crafting this alliance, right? Because you can, when you listen to what Mike and Londell and I have to share here, this is how, if we were in a space together in a men's group, we would be doing this together. And it works psychosomatically the same way for you to listen to these right now and to agree to them. Or if you don't agree to them, to need to talk about it more, to feel comfortable, to get uncomfortable, to do this work. Okay, so I'll invite you, if there's anything you need to talk about with us, that's why the stewards are here in our community, and to reach out to your community steward to have a conversation, to be able to step into these containers. So number one, confidentiality versus secrecy. It's just very important to me that anything and everything you share in these spaces is confidential. It is confidential, but it is not a secret. And so one of the reasons why we differentiate between confidentiality and secrecy is because sometimes when we form a confidential relationship, is what we do is we end up using that space or that relationship to escape our life. Okay. We create an island outside of our life that we can escape to. And then all of these tools we start using them to create a space that we can wall off and not feel uncomfortable. Okay. But our intention here is actually to bring this work, what we learn in this work, outside of this space into our life as it is. And so in order to be able to do that in a group with a group of other human beings who identify as male and a group of men, right, is that we all need to know the difference between confidentiality and secrecy. And so what we do in these spaces is confidential, and what we share and say is confidential, but it's not a secret. You have permission, and we actually want you to take this work outside of here and to share this experience with what you learn from this experience with your partner, with your journal, with your art project, with your coworkers, with your therapist, okay, or on your podcast. But you don't have permission to talk about what another man says specifically in the group, or to share personally identifiable information about another man. Okay. So does everyone here in the space understand that? Thank you, Londell. Thank you, Mike. Okay. And so that's how we start to get these agreements. Okay. I noticed on and in my body when I saw them affirm that I felt a sensation of openness just immediately. And I already know these gentlemen. So the second one is the intention. Okay. And this is very important. This is the Unshakable Man Community intention. So notice how I speak for myself here. Okay. Notice how I speak for myself. I don't speak for Londell or Mike or you. Okay. So my intention is to create spaces where I can personally practice tools and skills to get out of my head and egoic patterns and to get into my body. So my intention is to create spaces where I can personally practice tools and skills to get out of my head and egoic patterns and to get into my body. Now, Londell and Mike, do you guys share that intention? Okay, so they both raise their hands. So now, if you listening to this, if you share that intention and I share that intention, then what happens is we have now started to form a very special container. Okay. And the reason why this container is so special is because the environment in our relationships outside of this space, by default, the default environment that we exist in outside of this space, we don't have that intention. And the other human beings in our life don't always carry that intention. Okay, to slow down and practice tools and skills to get out of our head and egoic patterns and to get into our bodies. And this is one of the fundamental reasons why this work is so special, is so sacred. And I'm going to use that word for the first time here. Sacred. It's because of that shared intention, right? To slow down and get into our bodies. Okay. To practice those tools and skills. And so this brings me to the third piece and the last one. And this has lots of different names out there, lots of different references to this. But my favorite two ways to call this are in our community that they tend to it gets called is the paradox of safe space or cultivating a brave space. Okay. And so what happens is if Londell and Mike and I, or you listening, if we have an intention to create a safe space or for the space to be safe, which we might, or we likely have if we said yes to that question, is there's a paradox to this. And that paradox is that whether I'm conscious of it or not, I will very likely make the space unsafe from moment to moment, just purely because of some unconscious desire to have the space be safe. And this is why, and this is what's tricky about this, is that if I want to have the space be safe for Londell, I may manipulate or shift how I show up in order to try to make Londell feel more comfortable. Or Mike may shift or change how he's showing up in order to get me to like him, right? And this is something that simply happens through the development of relational intimacy, through survival, right? Through wanting to belong. It's something that happens. But in order for us to be able to do this work, to be able to work with any and all emotions in the space, what we have to do is just become conscious, bring this paradox to the surface, bring it out from the unknown area and bring it up into the light, and just acknowledge that this happens in relationship, right? So that we can become aware of it. And then instead of trying to manipulate or change or do something nifty to get around it, what we do is we make a different intention. And so we don't have an intention. We don't want this space to necessarily be safe. That's not my intention. My intention is to create a brave space. And that's a space where everyone in the space knows how to reinstate safety when it's lost. Okay. So we all know how to take responsibility to let the group know what we're feeling when it shifts or changes, so that if there is a rupture or if I notice myself disconnect, I'm not making it Mike's responsibility to interpret how I'm feeling. I can take responsibility to let the others know in the group how I'm feeling. Okay. And in our community, in our agreements, we simply ask that in order to do this work, if there's ever a rupture in the group, to be a part of the community, you agree to just return to the container if a rupture should occur, in order to tend and mend, in order to move through it. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end up liking that person or feeling connected to that person, but these are the agreements. This is crafting the alliance that allows us to step into this space, to start to work on and in our bodies, and to start to learn these somatic self-leadership tools. So Londell and Mike, that was a long description, but can you both take responsibility to the best of your ability to let us know how you feel if you notice it should shift or change? Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Wow. I haven't done that outside of a live group experience in a while. Did you guys have anything you wanted to add? Thank you so much for your patience and your body language and listening. It was really helpful for me as I shared just that opening, crafting the alliance.
For me, I would like to share the very last, creating a brave space over a safe space. That's, for me personally, that's what allows me to really open up and really share deep, meaningful, vulnerable things, because I know that it's okay to share those things in this space. Whereas other groups I've been in where it has been a safe space, I was always cognizant of the people around me and ensuring that I was, for lack of a better term, PC. This is one of those things that makes this such a powerful experience.
Londell, I saw you shaking your head up and down. Do you want to jump in? I mean, maybe we could actually just engage on this for a little bit, because I feel connected to this and it seems important.
DEI Diversity, equity, inclusion, and access is what I do for a living.
Thank you.
And to that point, the reason I bring it up is because, as a matter of fact, today we just had this conversation at my workplace. And unfortunately, in the process of moving people towards diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, people feel as though, in my experiences, people feel as though they are not able to say what's truly in their heart without some sort of retribution, or some negative consequence coming to them. And to Mike's point, a brave space is very different than a safe space. A safe space means, to me, and to how I've observed it, is I won't be offended by anything anyone else says. No one else will say anything that will offend me. So therefore, it's more of and these are Londell's words, obviously, it's more of a kumbaya circle, that we're all going to just hold hands and sing, and it's not really addressing the issue. And that's not what DEIA is. And it's definitely not what the Unshakable Man is. Change comes from being uncomfortable. And to be uncomfortable, you have to be brave. And so being in a brave space means being able to hear something, say something, witness something that is uncomfortable. And when you are uncomfortable, you dive into that discomfort and understand why you're uncomfortable. It doesn't mean that you need to go into a story or psychoanalyze yourself right then and there. However, it does mean that outside of that circle or that moment, one does have to sit with themselves and say, why is it that during this time I have felt this way? Or why is it that this triggered me so?
Can I jump in with you and juggle in here?
Please do.
So this, and to the last episode when we talked about the structure, right, of the space. And I remember I felt inspired and joyful. I laughed when you were like, oh, there's no structure, right? And just in the setting that we were in that space. What I would love to bring in is that this is one of the main reasons why I think that this type of community is so special and so unique in a man's life, is that this isn't our office. This isn't our work environment. We aren't in each other's social milieu, direct social milieu of connections. And so there is that construct or that ability to take a safe risk, or to take risks in a way that might be very different in a DEI process inside of my work, right? Or or even in another community. And at the same time, what I heard you say is like, to understand why and to notice things that make you feel uncomfortable. And what we're doing here, what we're going to do over this course and over this program, is carry men through something to experience. And we're talking about this before you go into the space, right? But what I want to point men to is what you naturally brought up in your explanation, which was something that makes you uncomfortable on or in your body. And so to connect that to the power of presence and how to check in is that when we are in the groups, what we do is we arrive, we have agreements, which are just the beginning, is that crafting the alliance, right? And then we have our grounding, and then we have our first round check-in, our second round check-in, our check-out, and then our inspired integrations. And so the reason for this structure of allowing a man to check in and to share into the space is that when we slow it down, I can notice, and when we point for you to notice what is happening on or in your body, right? I can notice, Londell, if you shared something, and while you're sharing, I notice that there is a sensation on or in my body that feels tight, or maybe my shoulders come in, right? This is interoception. This is body awareness, bodyfulness, right? And this is what we're doing in the groups, right? And then what am I feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? And then actually, we're not here to understand. We're here to sit with, right? And to watch the story in our head. And I think that it's that opportunity to slow it down and to be with that experience, right? And I see you shaking your head up and down. So I'm super curious, Londell, about what you'll add in here, right? But it's oftentimes in this work, it's getting to watch the story in our head, go past, move through, and be fully open to the experience on and in the body. And then also the sensations on and in the body that are becoming emotions that we have a feeling about that lead to a thought and then a mood and a judgment and a story and a belief system, right? They happen so quickly outside of the space that if we can actually be in this container and notice how I'm moving my body back and forth in like a wave motion, what we create is the opportunity to allow that belief system or that immediate reaction to fade, or we can actually be aware that it's something we carry inside and we're not allowing emotional contagion or projection to project it onto you, Londell, right? And in this moment, I feel excited and overjoyed that we were able to come to this space of an explanation of like what happens in the group. Because the story in my head is that's what we're aiming for here, is to almost like paint this picture. But even as I say that, I just want to say anyone who's listening that listening to this is not experiencing it, right? So it's very important to notice that. If you feel inspired from this, come and try it out. I definitely jumped in there in the middle, Londell. So if there's anything you want to add to that.
No. I mean, it's not that I don't feel you didn't jump in the middle. You jumped in where you needed to jump in. I feel as though I have to explain my added comments. I am an avid horror movie fan, and so I conflate good things with horror movies. And so what I'm about to explain, is not necessarily indicative of anything really, but it's just kind of how my brain works. So if either of you have seen the movie Get Out, it's a Jordan Peele movie. I
can't believe we're bringing Get Out into our fundamentals course right now. But yes. and along the lines of DEI, but I am ready. Let's do this.
Well, it's just about a practice that one of the antagonists uses, and I want to liken it. I'm not comparing it. I want to liken it to the check-in process. And in other words, that you used with me, Chris, when we first started working together, was dropping in. Mm-hmm. And so in Get Out, for those, Mike, have you seen Get Out?
I have not.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's more of a thriller than it is a horror, but nonetheless. So this gentleman goes to his girlfriend's house, and some sundry things are happening. His girlfriend's mother is a psychotherapist, or hypnotherapist, sorry. And the way in which she hypnotizes people is with a teacup, and she stirs the teacup. And as she stirs the teacup while she's talking, she gets to a point where the person is so relaxed, and she tinks her spoon on the side of the teacup. And excuse me. And the protagonist in this movie, he falls into what he calls the sunken place. Now, I know at this point everyone's like, "Oh my God, that's a horrible place that this man falls in." Well, what I'm likening it to is the depth in which we can fall into when we check in properly, in going into our feelings and dropping into that space. Because when I've dropped in, and when I do drop in, I drop in at different levels. And sometimes I can drop into group at a level that is so serene and so deep that it literally feels like there's nothing else around me but the circle of men.
Yeah.
And it's very intentional. And Chris mentioned this wave. He mentioned how he was undulating while I was talking. And that's very similar to the sunken place in which, ironically enough, Chris in the movie finds himself in a puddle, in a pool of water. But it's the depth, and you can go deep and you can come back, and you can go deep and you can come back. And so, again, I'm not saying it's a horrible, horrific, mind-controlling thing. That's not my point at all. My point is taking the effort to relax and surrender, because the protagonist in Get Out did not believe he could be hypnotized. He did not believe he could fall into a space where he could just let go like that. And when he did let go, he experienced, unfortunately for him, some negative space, but fortunately for us, we can find a positive space amongst the negativity, even if we have to release it or let it go, what have you. Well, and so for me, that's what I get out of it.
And to that negative and positive space, what I would love to play in on this is that when we get into this space, and so this is the second stage of our lesson here tonight, and we're going to move into simply appreciating together out loud. We're going to move into simply appreciating what it means to be present and how it's connected to the body. Okay. And this is a key teaching for the Unshakable Man community and for you as a human being in your life, making the journey to become whole, to be able to be fully expressed, as we call it here, making the full somatic journey. Okay. And so what I noticed in there, Londell, is that you said to make the effort to allow yourself to relax. And it's almost like a paradox, right? Like making the effort to allow yourself to relax. And what I want to connect that to you here in our teaching is that we actually need a protocol, right? Lots of wisdom practices have these. There's many of them, and we teach them here. Okay. And one of them is the 3x3 Unshakable Man Check-in. In our breathwork practices, we have 12-fold lower belly breathing, we have wave breathing, but we're going to learn tonight the 3x3 Unshakable Man Check-in as a tool set to get out of the head and into the body. And what we do is we learn the tool with our active awareness, and then it becomes embodied, and we get better and better at moving through it and allowing our active awareness to relax and to open, right? And to allow sensations on and in the body to come up and out, and for ourselves to drop in with a group of other men. Now, the other thing that we have helping us is we have community. We have co-regulation, which is this thing that's running underneath the surface, which is this concept of when two human bodies, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 or 28, when we are in a space with the same intention to allow us, having crafted the alliance, our nervous systems automatically start to sync up. And so when I witness Londell moving through the stages of the check-in, and I start to blink when he blinks, when I start to take in a deep breath, when he takes a deep breath, his ability to get out of his head and to get into his body helps my nervous system start to come into rest and digest or tend and mend. Right? And we start to get out of the fight or flight response, out of our stress responses, and we start to discover that we can actually let go. We can simply allow ourselves to be. And then what I heard, Londell, again, what you brought in was this thing of getting to work with negative experiences versus positive experiences. And what we find inside the space is that there are no good or bad emotions. There's only constructive or destructive reactions to emotions. And we go into this much more in depth in our facilitator training and in our process groups. This is the introductory. This is the fundamentals course. But we're going to mention this here is that outside of this space in the default world, there absolutely are good and bad emotions. We exist in this world where we cling to certain emotions thinking they're good, and we run away from bad ones. But what that means on and in our body is that the nervous system shuts down to something that we consider to be negative, and we open up or we cling to things that we think to be positive. Okay, but that is a judgment of the quality of that experience on and in the body. right? There are actually no good or bad emotions. There's only constructive or destructive reactions. And so because of the space and the structure and the tools to check in that we're learning here over this course, when a man brings something into the space, I notice a sensation on and in my body or an autonomic response that I can now become aware of. Instead of shutting that response down, I can be invited to, hey, Chris, what was that? Right? And we can start to work with men in the space. But we're not going to get into that in this fundamentals course. That is something that the facilitators and the men who are in the community start to learn. So that's what you'll learn as you move through your first 12 groups. Usually you start to pick those skills up after about 4 to 12 groups. This fundamentals training is we're specifically focusing on your first 4 experiences. And like we said before, once you finish going to your first 4 groups, you really could just leave this and have had this awesome experience. And I'm sure my hope is that we're going to hear from you in a year saying, hey, this was super, super helpful. It really planted a seed in my life. Or you're going to end up wanting to practice and to train together with us, as I have, as Londell and Mike has, right? But you can certainly get a lot out of this by just going to these first 4 groups. So guys, it just creatively here, if I were to ask you just what do you think a man needs to know to appreciate the power of being present and connecting that to the body, right? Like, what in your experience does that question inspire, or what do you think a man might need to know just coming into here? And I can rephrase it, what it means. So to share what we're appreciating, what it means to be present and how it's connected to the body from your experience.
I'll speak for me. So for me, the day is busy. There's a lot of, activity with work and with family and, a lot of things that has your mind going and all this. And so I kind of look at this coming into a group and, the agreements and becoming present as a way to slow down, release all of that stuff. It reminds me of a commercial. I'm dating myself, but there was a commercial that used to say, Calgon, take me away. And it was this person with like a bubble bath. And they would just get in this bubble bath and it would just, totally relax them and all of the worries of the world go. But I think what this is actually, for me, it's allowing me to get into a space where I can actually feel what's going on in my body and not suppress it, not push it away because I got to do something else. So I can't be feeling that right now because I've got this phone call I got to get on.
Which happens.
I've got this meeting I got to go to or whatever it is. Yes, totally. And so coming in here and just slowing down, just allows me to get into my body and actually feel something. And that's been a fantastic experience for me.
To just juggle with you, something I notice in what you shared, Mike, about what was great with the bubble bath is, and with suppression, right? With this, something I just wanted to share in there is that like this connotation that somehow like I shouldn't be suppressing certain emotions. And even that isn't bad or good. There's constructive and destructive consequences for that suppression outside of this space, right? Like to show up, to be able to be an effective partner, to be an effective teammate at your job. But what I notice in my language in your share is it's almost like a portal. It's like a mental, emotional, physical massage of being, when you check in the group, is it brings you into your body and you get to either allow these things to let go and you're not holding on to them the way that you were before. But to me, this is a practice. This is literally like a portal in my life that I can see myself in, right? Like when I check in, it's like this speed bump. And then if Londell brings something into the space or another man brings something into the space, even if I don't fully identify with it in some way, or if I don't feel completely connected to it, even that gives me something to see myself or my own experience of my life through, which has a grounding, releasing affect to it. And then I carry that awareness out into my life, right, from the group itself.
It's been kind of mushing around in my mind since we've been talking about this. And one of the things for me in coming into the group and then getting into my body, it's when I start listening to other men and there's something that I react to. And so getting into that place where I can just, be relaxed and feel that. And it's like you said, Chris, it's not good or bad. It's just what I do with that feeling. Am I going to be constructive with it or am I going to be destructive with it? But it's mine.
And what?
It's just somebody else has given that
to you
gift to me.
What
just
would
through
be
whatever
a
they're
constructive
speaking.
or a destructive response to an emotion, just for you, just from your own perspective of that example?
Well, destructive for me, but just to be shut down, because I want to be open to new experiences. I'm very much of a mind that those that we interact with are mirrors to us. So when somebody says something, they're showing me something for myself. And so I can take that and go, I can use it from a constructive perspective and go, oh, that person seemed really angry. What is that showing me? Is this situation that they're dealing with, maybe I've dealt with that before, and how did that make me feel? Or I could take that and go, oh, that's BS. I'm going to push that down and never think about it again. But I know that's not the case because I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it in my body. So that means it's there. So I want to do something with that.
Definitely, and looking to go deeper into this as we move through the training itself. But I think something that's important for me to share in here is that even in my asking you, Mike, what is constructive or destructive to you, it's really important to me that any man who's coming in here know that when I asked you that, it's what's important to me is that we learn to discern for ourselves and be able to look at a constructive versus destructive response. We're not judging. I'm not saying, Mike, that if you shut down to that's destructive, because from your perspective, that could have been a constructive outcome in that moment for you. Right, our constructive response, right? But as we learn to move in, to be in these experiences together, this is how we together help men in the space to find their own wisdom and healing, to be able to discern for myself on and in my body what is a constructive versus destructive response. And the way that we show another man versus tell another man what to do is I share my experience of a relationship and just in the space. And maybe if that man is stuck in a destructive reaction pattern, he might feel inspired because I'm inspiring that man. I'm calling him up. I'm not telling him what to do. I'm just sharing around him. Londell, you've been so patient and just nodding over there. I'd love to just create some space for you. And guys, let me know if I'm not doing a good job moving the energy around in the space. So yeah.
There's no judgments to be had, sir. I mean, there's just so many things I don't feel like I need to necessarily add anything to the conversation. In that, I guess, but I'm about to add something to the conversation. To be prepared to feel. I think that's the key thing is for myself. I'm a pretty sensitive person, and I've always been a sensitive person. And I acknowledge that I've often been very outward facing with those sensitivities, meaning it's much more about being a victim. My life has been much more about being a victim of others. And I'm not going to minimize those feelings. And I'm going to acknowledge that I have learned that the feelings that I do have oftentimes are misdirected at others when they are things that I really need to own, and I'm resistant to owning them. And so to very much what Mike said, I become very judgmental of the things I see in others that I resent in myself. And so when either I have an issue with myself or with the world, or another man brings up his issue, and then I become judgmental when he brings up his issue, I have to sit with myself and I have to manage myself about, again, why do I feel that? Why am I reacting this way to this man's real lived experience? And that goes back to my feelings.
Yeah.
And feeling it and understanding where I feel it. And there's the stereotype of men not feeling their feelings. I mean, we feel our feelings, but we may brush them aside or don't. Some of us may brush them aside, or some of us may not feel them. We feel them on just all differently. Let's just say that.
Yeah. I don't know what you're feeling.
Way to feel them.
You don't know what I'm feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the point I think I'm trying to make is just be open to feeling feelings and be open to feeling them differently and being open to new feelings. So that if you come in now I'm being critical, and this is my criticism. If you come into a space being unwilling to learn like this, and in essence being closed, it's not going to be helpful. It just, because if I came into this space thinking I knew everything, just, with my history and what have you, and just, said, screw everything. These guys just don't know what they're talking about, whatever, and was just resistant to everything, then of course I'm not going to get anything. Yeah. If I pretend to check in, or even if I do check in and I'm resistant to what comes up for me during the processes, I'm doing myself a disservice, and I have to acknowledge that. And I can't blame or shift the responsibility to anyone else. So I guess my ultimate thing is to feel your feelings and own your feelings and be willing to process those.
Thank you, Londell. Thank you for bringing in like another perspective into this when you shifted and said, like, I'm being critical. What I would love to do is use that as another lens into this space of one of the most beautiful and inspiring opportunities, I think, in practicing and going through different experiences in these containers is the emptiness of the structure. And that because any and all emotions are allowed to be present, because we're not here to get along, because we're not here to start a business, to fix your relationship, to achieve your goals, right? We're literally here to learn how to be with, to get out of our head and to get into our bodies and to learn to work with whatever is in the space. If a man is being disruptive, right, or a man is being argumentative or is attacking another man, then that's not in alignment with our agreements of just simply being able to do this work. But there's something else that I think you bring up that is almost even more, which actually to me always turns into what that man needed to learn. And oftentimes we hear it later when the man reaches back out to us, which only develops more confidence in the work for me. And then I mean confidence in an internal sense of just knowing, like it's okay, right? Which is that oftentimes we are unaware of our own protective masks that we wear. And the men in the space, our nervous systems can help you see yourself in ways that you've never been able to, right? And so that might mean me being in a container with a man and then saying, hey, Joe, when he said that, you seem to tighten up. What's going on for you right now in your body? I might protect that. If I was Joe and this is, I might say, oh, no, I'm not, and deny, right? But it's through the being with, in my experience. And again, this is why we're recording this, right? Is that this community is a living, breathing thing. This is not something that Mike and Londell and myself can write down and then give you a textbook, a map. This is a map, but you have to walk the territory, and we are a part of this community. And we have to do our best every single day, every group that we show up into, to open and to be with and to feel our way through this process as we grow. With that being said, I think we should probably transition on, because this podcast is now going to be an hour and a half long, and that's fine. So we're going to transition into the actual teaching, the lesson here. And that is how to do the 3x3 Unshakable Man Check-in. Okay. So for this, what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to give an opportunity for Londell and Mike to go. And my invite to you listening or moving through this is, while I'm doing this, is I'll just invite you to start to open and start to attune to even my own check-in and Londell's and Mike's. And if you want, you can pause whatever the listening device that you're on at the end, and you can do your own check-in in between maybe Londell and Mike, if you just want to give yourself the actual felt experience of giving yourself one check-in before coming to a group. Okay. But if you have any questions, we have office hours every Thursday, and you can send them to us in the community, and we're here to help. But along the way here, the point of this protocol is not to do it right. The point of this protocol is to have a protocol to start to be able to become aware of our own awareness, right? To start to see things in it every time we do it. And it's a stairway to drop out of your head and to get into your body. Okay. So the way that it starts is I'll say, my name is Chris and I am checking in. So you're not going to say, my name is Chris. You're going to say, my name is blank and I am checking in. And I'm going to take a deep breath in my nose and out my mouth. Third thing I want to just add in here, there's the structure, the language, and then the body. Okay, so the structure, the language, and the body. We're just going to go through the structure, the language, and the body. I'm going to talk through it, and then I'm going to do it myself. So it starts out with, my name is Chris, and I am checking in. And then I'll take a deep breath in my nose and out my mouth. And I'm going to move through 3 stages of noticing. And at the end, I'm going to say it one more time. My name is Chris, and I am checking in. And I'll take a deep breath in my nose and out my mouth. And then all that I ask is that the men in the space who are receiving me is that they acknowledge that they heard me. Okay. And so just say something at the end like, thank you, Chris, or good to be with you. Okay. Now, in the beginning, after I say, my name is Chris and I'm checking in, I'm going to take my energy and awareness out into the space around me. I'm going to notice 3 things on or in the space around me. And when I describe them to you, I'm going to use dry yet descriptive language. And that's important. I'll tell you why in a little bit. Then I'll take a deep breath in my nose, out my mouth, and I'm going to bring my awareness into my body. Okay, so I'm coming into my body. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm just going to notice 3 or more things on or in my body. Okay, sensations on or in my body. Again, using dry yet descriptive language. Then I'll take a deep breath in my nose, out my mouth, and I'm going to scan my emotional state. And when I describe my emotional state, I'm just going to give you 3 different ways that I'd like to describe my emotional state. And again, I use dry yet descriptive language. And I always like to say, you don't have to be right. You can just be creative with this. Okay. So now along the way, noticing 3 things in the space around me, noticing 3 things on or in my body, and then describing my emotional state in 3 or more ways. I'm using dry yet descriptive language. So the language that we use to relate to our experience, whether we're in our head talking to ourselves or whether I'm relating or telling somebody about my experience, is what's called formative language. And formative language comes in 4 major categories. Okay. We have amplification, suppression, judgment, and story. Okay. So when I'm describing my relationship with my experience of my life or my surroundings, I tend to amplify, suppress, judge, or tell stories. And so while I am checking in, or while another man in the space is checking in, the other men in the space are receiving me. Okay. When I breathe, maybe they take a breath. When I notice something in my space, maybe they notice something in their space or something not in their space. And what this does is it opens us to attunement. We start to attune to one another. Now, the next layer of this is giving and receiving powerful adjustments. And so the men in the space are going to receive your check-in. And when we receive you, we're listening for amplification, suppression, judgment, and stories or indulgent descriptions. And so what they're going to do is if I hear you or if they hear you use an amplifier, suppressor, judgment, or story, I'm doing a lot of repetition here, then they may repeat what they hear you say out loud. And this repetition to you is an adjustment. It is not us telling you that you are wrong. It's us pointing and helping you notice, hey, did you see that amplifier, suppressor, that judgment, or that story? And then you have a choice. Okay, you have a choice to receive that adjustment or to deny it, to throw it away and not receive it, or to restate what you were holding up, what you were saying. Okay. And when you do this, you actually connect to it more mindfully, more intentionally on and in your body because you're being more emphatic with it. Or you can just repeat what you were saying without that. So this is probably better with a description. Okay. So imagine if I were checking in, I was noticing my space and I noticed a really clean desk that I cleaned off this morning after a busy week and a camping trip, and my backpack for 3 weeks now from 3 different trips is still hanging off the side of it. Okay. I notice a really clean desk that I cleaned off this morning, and then I told you all this stuff about it. So really clean, really is an amplifier. Clean is a judgment of the quality of the desk. And then everything I said after that was this mindless, I was up in my head telling you a story about all of the stuff in my head that is attached to that desk and the blue backpack that's hanging off the side of it. Okay. So if you were receiving me, men in the space, they might simply whisper to me, hey, really clean. And then I can notice and just say, I notice a desk. Where this becomes more and more powerful is as we get into our bodies. Because as we get into subtle sensations on and in the body, we have a tendency to suppress what we're feeling on and in our body without even knowing it. It might be, I feel kind of sad, or I feel a little sad, versus simply just saying, I feel sad, and allowing that sensation to come up on or in the body. And we're here to support one another. And we'll get into this later, but right now we're just learning about formative language and to start to give and receive adjustments and to start to notice it in our check-in. And so that's why we do these check-ins. Okay, so here I go. I'm going to notice, I'm going to take a deep breath in my nose, out my mouth. And if you're listening, now we're actually moving into actively checking in. I'll invite you to just follow along with my breath. If you want to take a deep breath in your nose, out your mouth, you could do it. Okay. So my name is Chris and I'm checking in, doing a full wave breath. I noticed 2 blue socks crumpled up on the floor. I noticed the sound of a collar or something jingling in the distance. And I notice a soft pink hue on the horizon. And the sound of somebody just started their car engine outside. Physically honoring my body. I notice tingly sensation down the right side of my earlobe, down the back of my neck. I notice I just swallowed and stretch my shoulders. And I notice my muscles around my eyes just relaxed, and I can feel my heart beating in the palms of my hands. Emotionally, I feel joyful, I feel goofy, and I feel open. I'm Chris, and I'm checking in.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Londell. I'll pass it on to Londell.
Thank you again, Chris. This is Londell checking in. In front of me, I see my webcam with a blue dot. I see a batik fabric hanging on the wall. And I see a calendar with a man holding a sun salutation. Physically, I feel my left hand sitting on top of my right hand, which are both sitting on top of the desk. I feel my feet resting on the leg of the chair, and I can feel the floor rumbling as my dog is scratching on the floor. Emotionally, I feel joyful. I feel a bit giddy. I feel in brotherhood. This is Londell, and I'm checking in.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. I'll pass it over to Mike.
Thanks. Mike, checking in. I see the picture of Don Quixote behind Chris. I see lampshade hanging from the ceiling. And I see a stack of business cards. In my body, feel my toes crunched up in my slippers. Feel the pressure from my headphones on my ears. I feel a pushing sensation on my right hip. Emotionally, I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling open. And I'm feeling joyful.
Good to be here with you, Mike.
I'm Mike, and I'm checking in. Thanks, guys.
Could we all just take a single soup breath? A breath like we just walked in the house. We noticed someone was cooking. And then on our exhale, just go ahead and let's just take that soup breath to start. What did you guys notice just getting to go from before to doing our check-in to what did you notice in your check-in that might be helpful to share your experience for any man that might be listening?
That's how I enjoy the term dropping in. because I feel as though we have dropped down a level. I can definitely, I feel slower. I feel that our conversation slowed down. I feel much more intentional right now. And so we've gone a level deeper than where we were before.
I noticed the grin on my face to that.
Love that. It's the sensation I get is I just doing that puts me in a space where I'm ready to receive. And so I love what Londell says about dropping in, because it does. It takes me from maybe being here and then just that slow down and that just let's get into this type of feeling.
I noticed something that I can really only laugh at, and it's this realization that, Londell, there were so many times in our hour together today that I noticed you share. There were probably 4 of them that just came to me as I was witnessing you check in and Mike check in, where I wanted to ask you, hey, Londell, what are you feeling right now? Where do you feel that? And I stopped myself. I held back from asking you a question that would help maybe bring you and I and Mike deeper based on things that you had shared. And Mike, I noticed a story in my head and a judgment that I was like, oh, was I paying attention to Mike in the same way? Cause it was like, what was more prevalent to me was like a few moments where I actually held myself back. But in this moment, I'm appreciating how that profundity, right? That and that to me, it's awe. It inspires there's a tightness in my chest and a smile on my face. I can't, because it just aligns with all of these memories, these moments in my life where I didn't make a choice to go deeper in order to be expedient, right? Or in order to do something, to get something done, or right. And how just here today with you gentlemen, dropping in with you guys in a group is this is not a group right now. And I feel protective of honoring the group space where we're not on video, right? But I'm appreciating how quickly I am able to actually be in a group with you men here right now. I feel safe to do that. And getting to say a bit to you was just right?
I'm really good at that.
Right. No, I mean, but there are no, right? I don't know if this is more advanced than we need to get. I don't think anything that just automatically comes up in here could be more advanced. But to men who might be listening to this, as you come into this community, it's just so important to me to remind myself and any man who steps into this space that we are not here to do this work right. We are here to learn skills, to be more open, to allow the fullness of who we are to come through, and to be able to experience our life more fully and to be whole, and to pass that on to everyone and everything, right? All of our relationships, our work, our calling. And it's just, and so we have to discern it, right? We have to feel through it, and get to learn to use these tools in order to be in our experience, right? And to learn to be more skillful, to be able to pass to focus, and to allow our to get into a state of flow in our life, and to just pass on more love, really, in my words. So I guess to finish this off, what I'd love to do is to just finish off with, what do we want to remind men being in their first week, right? They just joined the community after having listened to this whole thing. What do we maybe want to leave them with? And I'm happy to go first to give you guys an opportunity to come up with something, or to just scan your perceptual database, right? anything that's relevant, feels resonant, connected. But for me, I'm gonna go off of something that Londell inspired for me, which is to allow yourself to, what I heard in my words from him was to allow yourself to get comfortable, to get uncomfortable, to try something new, to have that beginner's mind. And in that, it's really to just show up, right? Even though you listened to this entire episode to get here and you heard 3 other men learn how to check in, please just wipe that out of your brain. Don't practice. Don't try to do well at this, right? The only reason for this to be here is to plant some seeds of inspiration and the hope that you pick this up enough to feel comfortable enough to come into your first group. And that in that first group, if you want to check in, you get to check in. You're always at choice to pass. But after you check in, the only thing you really have to do in your first group is just share what in the world brought you here and have that experience. And then after the group ends, my invite to you is to reflect on that experience. And you can either reflect on that experience with a community steward one-on-one, a man in the group that you feel inspired to schedule a call with, or you can reflect on it in writing in the community. And that's my tip here. Pass it on to whoever feels like they're ready to go.
I would say my one tip is that you can't get it wrong. You show up, be authentic, be yourself, and you can't get it wrong.
So it's coming up for me after you asked that question. And first of all, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Chris. But what's coming up for me, I'm hoping this doesn't sound way inappropriate, but I'm going to say it anyway. Don't be afraid to get naked, because it's being naked amongst other men, particularly men that you don't know, is really frightening. And it can be really intimidating because whether we want to admit it or not, we all compare ourselves to other men. What bits and pieces we compare is different. Yet when we get down to it all, we're all men, all the same, regardless of shape, size, color, what have you. And when we're able to get past that, we are able to look at ourselves very differently. We're able to be more appreciative of our own gifts and our own strengths. And when we're able to love ourselves, and I'm going to turn this to one I statement, when I experienced physically being able to get naked around other men, because I have horrible body issues, I embraced myself and stopped judging myself. I infinitely appreciated myself so much more and compare myself a lot less to other men than I did before. And it's all goes down to vulnerability, the willingness about being vulnerable with other men. And so that's being willing to be naked in front of another man, whether you know him or not. Don't assume that you know his intentions. Don't assume that he has a motive. Just be there. If you are to assume something, try your best to assume the best. And I know when I don't know anything. Sometimes it can be difficult to have positive assumptions in the world in which we live, but we can have positive intentions if we so choose. And so that's what I would like to share.
Thank you, Londell. So this is week 1 of our fundamentals training. Our invite to you is to listen to this full podcast episode, to give it a practice, to give the 3x3 check-in a practice session if you want, prior to showing up in a group. And then your stretch is to show up in your first Unshakable Man Check-in group. And if you want to participate, to take, because you always have the ability to pass, everybody is at choice in the group, is to share, to practice doing your first check-in and to share what in your life brought you to this space, to this community. And then to check out, to have that experience, and then to reflect on it either with your community steward. You can come to Thursday group session that we hold every Thursday, and we record those if you can't make it, or you can schedule a one-on-one with a community steward or a member of the community who you feel connected to. Usually it's a man that you've met in the group, and that's where we start to generate that relational intimacy, that brotherhood, and that connection with other men in the space. Thank you so much, Londell and Mike. It's just such a joy to be able to co-create this fundamentals training with you. I will see you gentlemen soon for our second session, Survival, Shame, the Man Box, and Belonging. Have a good night, gentlemen.
Shay, have a good night.